Shalom, 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 baruchim habaim. We will begin in 1 minute. So, welcome, baruchim habaim. Today is Tuesday, July 2nd, 2024. Here in the Galil, in Haaretz, in Israel, it is 11:39 in the morning. Welcome to Awakening TORAH Mussar Mindfulness. I am Rabbi Chasya Uriel Steinbauer, the founder and director of the Institute for Holiness, Kehilat Mussar Mindfulness. You are joining us for our weekly public offering, looking at the weekly Torah portion from the Hebrew Bible, where we look at it from what we today, as practitioners of this path of Mussar mindfulness, what we can get from our ancestors and God from the weekly Torah portion to guide us on how to, first, in response to the genocide of October 7th here in Israel, how we can cope, how we can be on a path towards healing and recovery, and in general in our lives, how to integrate the teachings so that we get the most out of it, so that we can become the best versions of ourselves, of course, to fulfill our greatest desire to be of benefit to others. I'm delighted that you're here on the Hebrew day of 26th of Sivan, Rosh Chodesh. The new moon is coming up Friday night, I believe. The Hebrew year is 5784, Tafshin Pei Dalid. Before we begin, we always cover our kavanot, our intentions for today's session. So give me 1 second while I share with you. I have to tell you that Zoom, which we use as our format to share with you, updated and kind of created a new way of being on Zoom. Maybe you have it on your computer. Maybe you're joining us now on Zoom or live stream through any of the social media platforms, and also on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe. But anyway, I have to give feedback to Zoom. I don't like this new way of being. It's actually difficult to move through it and define things. But I'll adjust. I'll pivot. So maybe you're like me and are having this. So here are our kavanot, our intentions in front of us today that we share every time we come together to do awakening. So we're doing this time together, up to an hour, of caring for the self. This is an act of radical self-care. We are learning together, we're practicing mindfulness meditation to strengthen our own souls in order to be a benefit to others in the future. We're also doing this in order to strengthen our relationship with others, so we can be a better conduit of God's good to others when they need us. And finally, we're doing this to strengthen our relationship to God, to Hashem, to the divine. So obviously, that we can be this vessel for God to bring God's good to others. So may we merit fulfilling these kavanot, these intentions today, as we enter our learning and practice together. Delighted to be here. So what are we covering today? Where are we? If you've been following along, we are in Parshat NASO. We are in the book of Bamidbar. We're in the wilderness, the book of Numbers in English. So we are on the second parsha. Now you might be thinking, wait, aren't we? We just covered Shalach. We're a little bit behind. So we're covering Naso, which happened on June 15th. No, July. Yes, June. June, okay. June 15th, 2024. It took place on the Tet of Sivan, the 9th of Sivan, Tafshin Pei Dalid. So I'm going to give you a quick summary, as I usually do, of what is this Torah portion, what happened with it. And then we're going to go ahead and delve into what I think is important to the situation right now, what we need to get from it, and then practice together. So in this Torah portion, Moshe Rabbeinu, our beloved teacher, he completes the count of the families from the Shevet Levi, from the tribe of the Levites. And then Bnei Israel, our ancestors, the children of Israel, the Hebrews, the Jews, must keep their camp free of tumah, of impurity. Now, impurity doesn't mean filth or dirtiness. It's a very complicated concept, the idea of purity and impurity, but it's very much laid out in the Hebrew Bible and the Torah, what causes impurity, otherwise you're in a state of purity. And then what has to happen if you end up in a state of impurity? There are always states. Someone is never always impure or always pure. They're like mind states. They arise, there's a certain shelf life and they pass. But in order to pass through, one has to go through what is commanded by God and handed down to us by our ancestors to move through certain practices and rituals to become pure again. So this is the first time where it's leading up to this the whole time, but it's really becoming transparent by saying purity must be maintained in the whole camp in order to make it a space that God can dwell. It's not just the Mishkan, the sanctuary, right? It's not just the synagogue today. It's the whole community and how we behave. So this is very important to keep in mind. Especially in modern Western secular culture that separates church from state, this idea as if you can shelf religious practice and identity to understand our ancestors and who we are today as Jews is that we are a people, tribes, in addition to practicing and living out Judaism, which most of us do, not everyone. It's a way of being. It's not just something that's located in a synagogue and then you leave it. So let's continue. In this Torah portion is, for me, one of the most horrifying cases that, thank God, we don't practice and do anymore. It's the sotah. It's a sotah ritual is meant to address cases where the husband in a heteronormative marriage assumes that the wife has committed adultery, but he has no proof. And he brings her against her will, most likely without consent, as if she could consent back in the patriarchal relationship thousands and thousands of years ago. He feels that something dishonest has happened and enters the Mishkan space, in this case, the temple later on, to engage in a ritual with the priest in order to have her go through an ordeal to show if she is guilty or not. I'm not going to actually cover this today. People try to spin this in a very romantic or PC way. They'll say that trust is broken down in the marriage and that's why he's behaving this way. They will say that hopefully going through this ordeal, peace will be restored to the couple. I'm just going to say briefly, there is no peace here and there's no equality. When one partner, the one with all the power in the relationship, decides not to trust you, and he can, against your will, take you to the public sanctuary to undergo an ordeal, you're already then therefore presumed and treated as if guilty. The punishment itself, which she's punished before even being found guilty, the punishment itself is going through this humiliating ordeal. And it is an act of humiliation. She's, her head covering is removed. She's bared. There's many elements of this. So it's treating someone as if they're guilty, making them go through a humiliating process. And the whole process is this to calm down the rage and jealousy and mistrust of the husband. The way that scholars interpret this quickly is that had this ritual not exist, then you might have had husbands who decided to kill their wife at home for presuming that she has engaged in adultery. So listen, it's a horrifying ordeal. My opinion, shouldn't have happened, shouldn't have been commanded or included in the Torah. I understand it in its historical context, but you'll never see the opposite or ever hear the opposite, where there's an irrational, jealous wife who presumes that her husband has cheated on her, as if he could even do such a thing, because back then he can decide to have more than one wife. But he shouldn't cheat on her, of course, so he goes through a different process. And that she would bring him against his will to the temple to make him have to bear himself, whatever that might even meant for men back then, and to swallow these waters with the verses, to undergo this ordeal to humiliate him. You will never ever see that, and it doesn't exist. And so it just points to the hypocrisy, the sexism, and the pain and humiliation that some of our female ancestors had to go through. B'ezrat Hashem, God willing, this did not happen often, and it no longer does, thank God, which is a positive thing. It's a positive thing that our leadership and rabbis and people over time just decided to stop doing such barbaric radical behavior against the will of someone else, the consent of women. Okay, so that's what I'm not going to say about that one. We have models today throughout the world of, for instance, like radical Islamists who humiliate women, assume they're guilty, treat them as such, murder them, stone them, set them on fire. This is the outcome of such a model. And our ancient tradition and our ancestors, thank God, went through the process of trusting that this is not right for us and our community. Okay, so next is the Nazir. The Nazir in the masculine singular is a person who makes a vow to Hashem, to God, not to cut their hair, not to drink wine, grape juice, intoxicant like beer, or come into contact with a dead body for a set specific period of time. The person is, through this vow, is dedicating themselves to Hashem, to God, as this is their service. This is something they privately want to engage in and do. As I don't want to use the term higher service, but it's a highly disciplined, individualized form of service that the rest of the population is not engaged in and doing. Okay, after they have finished their time on it, it's always supposed to end after a specific amount of time. They would bring a korban, a sacrifice, an offering, in order to draw near to God and to end that contract, that relationship, that special time where they are dedicated to God in this service. Finally, the Kohanim, the priests, are commanded to bless our ancestors, Bnei Israel, by reciting the three special pasukim, the three special verses called Birkat Kohanim. This is the special prayer that we still do in synagogues regularly. And what we do as parents, if you're blessed and privileged to have children, on Friday night, either before or after lighting the Shabbat candles, where we bless them by laying hands on their head and blessing them. So it's a very special, beautiful verses that continue now 3,500, 400,000 years later. It's really beautiful and a miracle. to belong to such an ancient ancestral tradition, people, and here I am in our ancestral land. So may we all wake up to the good that is before us, even among the hell that is before us. Finally, each day for 12 days straight, one Nasi, chieftain of the tribes, from each shevet, from each tribe, would bring offerings of silver and gold objects, flowers, spices, and animals. Each of them brought the exact same objects, things. There are midrashim, stories about how they didn't know it or didn't plan it, but they all had a different offering in their soul and heart, even if the objects were exactly the same. It was for a different kavanah, different intention of why they were giving what they were giving and how they were individually drawing near to God on behalf of their shevet, on behalf of their tribe. So the Mishkan, the sanctuary in the Midbar, in the wilderness, is now fully stocked and ready for operation, which of course some of you have seen in the next week's Torah portion, which was Baha'alotecha and then Shalach, which we will Bezrat Hashem get to shortly this week. So what do I want to focus in on today that is very important? Okay, a couple of things. Taking from the concept and what we learned from the Nazir. As I had told you, the Nazir, the vow is to set him or herself apart from God. It was both women and men who engaged in this. And it even, if you want to follow along, we're in chapter 6, looking after verse 1, where it talks about speak to the Israelites and say to them, right? Ish or isha, man or woman. Ki yafli lindor neder nazir lehazir laadonai. Okay, if anyone, man or woman, goes ahead and utters a vow, surely utters, right, a vow, this Nazarite vow, they set themselves apart, right? He or she sets herself apart for God. And through it, how do they set themselves apart? How does one do this? They do it from abstaining from wine, yain, veshechar, from like we call it beer today, but it's other intoxicants, right? Chometz, yain, all these things. They can't drink it. They can't eat it. It happens to be anavim, grapes, any of these, okay, whether they're dried or fresh. And throughout the whole term, nothing they can eat from the grapevine. And no razor shall touch their head, no cutting of the hair at all, as I had said earlier. Now, the root Nazir, nun zayin resh, okay, means to separate oneself. We had learned earlier that one of the definitions of Kodesh, of holiness, of Kedusha, is to separate oneself, separate to either refrain from certain behavior in order to draw near to God, to be in the state that we call holiness, or to engage in certain acts in order to call this. So this is a separating oneself. And the separation is for God and implies sanctification, as I had said to you. And the implication is clear here, which is only by separating oneself, by abstaining from certain acts permitted to all others, can one be sanctified to God. Okay, this is really, really important. Listen to the language. The Nazir, the person who goes ahead and engages in this vow, they are separating themselves by doing certain acts or refraining from certain acts that actually are permitted to everyone else. And this is how they're sanctified to God. Okay. And why is that important to us? Why am I even bringing this up? So first, the other person, if you recall, who's been sanctified to God, even has, he wears on a amazing gold metal plate on his forehead, Kadosh le'Adonai, right? Holy to Adonai, sanctified, separated for this service is the Kohen Gadol, right? The high priest. This is the Nazir, through this vow, is the closest in behavior to the high priest. It's like if it's for someone who wishes they could be a priest or a high priest, and they're going to do it by engaging in this vow to draw near, to serve God in this way. So there's something really important about this that I think, one, the behavior that it takes the Nazir to do this. So what kind of person, not even about a person, what kind of practice, what kind of, what midah, what soul trait? I'm sure there's more than one, but in particular, what soul trait would the Nazir have to either have very strong, as Rav Walby, wonderful, may his memory be for blessing, master Mussar teacher, teaches that all of us have like a very strong midah that really encapsulates who we are. So maybe the Nazir is this person who has the midah of zerizut, sometimes translated as zeal, enthusiasm, fire-powered direction and follow through and purpose. This could be it. It could also be someone who wants to develop that, right? Wants to engage in a type of dedication and service and denying themselves something that's permitted to everyone else in order to develop who they are and to strengthen this midah of zerizut. So what is zerizut and why is this so important, right? There are actually three in Mussar mindfulness and the path that we practice, three strong elements, two very much so to the midah, and then the other one gets applied or used for most of us or others. The first element is that one is quick to act. Like once they have decided this is what I'm going to do, they're quick about it. They deliberate, they use wise deliberation, wise effort. And once they make that decision, they act, okay? So this is the same with the Nazir. How do we know this? The woman who goes ahead, because this is a very patriarchal society that these laws first came into being, she does not really own her own space and time as a second-class citizen. She's either owned by the father or the husband. And so, or that her time and space, let's say that she's not owned, but they control her timetable and what she does. And so she, when she utters this, first of all, she doesn't have to ask for permission. She utters it. And if the husband or father, depending on who is ruling over her at the time, hears her make this vow, and he doesn't intervene, he doesn't stop it. He has the right to do that based on being the patriarch or the husband. If he doesn't intervene and stop it, then it's in full effect. And so this is a girl or a woman of adult age who has thought about this, has deliberated, makes this vow out loud in front of her husband or her father, and waits patiently. She's full of zerizut, she's full of enthusiasm, she's ready to engage in this. He is silent, she is set, okay? There's a pause before she acts. In this case, what would acting be? It's acts of restraining. Not going to cut her hair anymore. She's not going to eat grapes. She's not going to drink wine or any other intoxicant. She's going to be very careful not to be around any deceased body. So she wants to engage in this, okay, right? So that's the first element. The second element of zerizut, of enthusiasm, is that not only did you deliberate wisely and then act, right? Once you made the decision, this is what I'm going to do, you act without delay, is that you have to have the persistence to stay with the task through its completion. Right? You never hear, I'm sure it existed, but in the Torah, you never hear of a case where the Nazir is like, ugh, I don't have the wherewithal to go through this. This self-restraint is too difficult for me to do. I didn't know how hard it was going to be to not eat grapes or drink wine or other intoxicant, or not to be around dead bodies. I can't follow through with this. So I'm sure in all of time, there was at least one case of this, because to be human, this is it. And then in that case, they would have to speak with the Kohen and work out ending that vow before, because it's a violation to the vow to God. They haven't fulfilled it. And they would have to, I'm sure, bring an additional korban and admit their sin, say they didn't really understand or know, right? But you never see that. You never hear of that in the Torah. Instead, the example is, and what we learn from the Nazir, is that it's someone who is persistent in their contract time, where the vow says, I'm going to do this for 10 weeks, right? 10 weeks, I'm not going to cut my hair. I'm not going to refrain from eating this, drinking this, all these things that are elements of it, and they follow through to the end, okay? And the final thing, and this I think you see very clearly in the case of the Nazir, is it's their determination to restrain themselves from acting. Right, the practice of self-restraint. We talk about being a gibor, which a lot of people in modern Hebrew see as like someone who's very strong, who's a hero, what we might call one of our beloved soldiers in the IDF. But rabbinic tradition for thousands and thousands of years has seen the gibor as someone who can, I'm going to put it in language of Mussar Mindfulness today, but I'll let you know the real language. The language I use today is someone who can practice self-restraint, someone who can say no to him or herself, right? The way it's worded in the tradition is someone could actually like dominate and conquer their evil inclination, right? This idea that we have within all of us, this inclination, both tov and ra, good and evil, that the evil one drives us to want to engage in certain behaviors, perhaps with these intoxicants, that we practice that self-restraint, but not even more than the self-restraint. The way it was traditionally seen is that you're supposed to dominate your inner self, to say no to this and to be able to control it, and even in wishful thinking, dominate it to the point where it's not even arising in you anymore. I think after years and years of Mussar learning and practice, most of us would agree that there is this no more dominating, getting rid of one's Yetzer Hara, or whatever it is that we're trying to not engage in, right? Instead, it's more this development and strengthening of self-restraint, the will. Okay, what does this have to do with us today? Very important. We today, as the Jewish people in general across the world, and our allies, our non-Jewish allies, the Zionists among all of us, but particular our army, our children that we are sending among all the borders, who are protecting us from this war of Iran's proxies, whether it's Hezbollah Houthis, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the PLO, Fatah, whatever's happening in Syria and Iraq, Iran, now Turkey, China, North Korea, Russia, you name it. We have really witnessed a great engagement, balance in a strengthening of the Midah of Zerisut, a real commitment to first really after and continues to be constant, wise deliberation, that then once they agree, the war cabinet and the leaders of the army, that this is what we must do, that we take action. Okay? This is very important in order to be able to protect one's boundaries, one's nation state, and its citizens. They're obligated to do so. Not only are they obligated to do so on behalf of their citizens, this is a war, a regional war that's probably going to turn into the Third World War. That is fighting against crimes against humanity, a radical jihadist, Islamist, almost a sense of trying to bring back this fantasy of the Ottoman Empire throughout Europe, throughout Africa, throughout Asia, throughout the United States and Canada, that we have decided that we must take action against. This is so much larger than the Jews and the Palestinians, than Gaza and Israel. Okay? This is about those who have embraced a death cult, a wish to dominate and kill and hurt anyone who is not like them, versus us, we who choose life, we who live this path. And so it's very important that after wise deliberation that you act. Okay, and this is what we've seen our army do. The second is having the persistence to stay with the task through its completion. This is probably the most difficult element of being strong and balanced in the Midah of Zerizut, in the soul trait, personality trait of enthusiasm and zeal. We see this challenge daily from the United States and other social media, popular opinion, who knows what you want to label it or call it, constantly challenging and if not trying to stop Israel from following through this task through completion. And it's so important. Those who are wise and know, for instance, like Douglas Murray, a wonderful supporter of Israel, a Zionist, amazing journalist, Andrew Fox, war strategist, lots of people who understand urban warfare, what happens, what is going on, the importance of this war for what precedent it'll set in the future. I'm even thinking of Coleman Hughes, who said that if you let Hamas win, this will set the future for all future terrorist groups, that if all they have to do is embed themselves in civilian population, and they're untouchable. They get to continue with their terror. If you tell the fighting army that they can't go in and fight because there are civilians there. This is such, if there's any war that is challenging not only the Jewish people in Israel, but the whole world watching future armies of other nation states, this must be followed through completion, no matter how horrifying, heartbreaking it is, the deaths in Gaza, the deaths among our children and our soldiers. Because we understand the long-term vision, the long-term consequence of not doing so. And so this is the most challenging and difficult. This is the place where people need the strongest strength, encouragement, yeah, you can even think in your own personal practice, what is it that strengthens me to follow through something through completion? Can I find that drive within, or do I need support? And if you think about the nation state, Medinat Israel, of the state of Israel, it needs its allies, it needs its support. This turns into a larger regional world war. It's going to have to be other nation states, just like in World War II, that have to come on board, sacrifice their own children, their own soldiers, in order to fight this, because this is a larger war of civilizations. This is a larger war of essentially a death cult threatening modern secular Western culture. And hopefully all of us will wake up to this and give the strength to follow through. The final thing is having the determination to restrain oneself from acting. War is brutal. Urban warfare is even more brutal. It's even more brutal when you have terrorist regimes who have learned to embed themselves in civilian populations in order to stop anyone from fighting them for fear that they'll kill a civilian, or to make anyone who fights them look like an evil, bad regime because they're willing to kill the civilians to get to the terrorist of the army. This is the situation. There is no moral equivalence, though, between us and the armies that support us fighting these people who are so evil that they're willing to sacrifice their own population by using them as shields. And so if you want to study and know about this urban warfare, it's all out there. Follow, I believe his name is Coleman Hughes' work, and others where they show the ratio to combat to civilian who has been killed in Gaza, for example. It is the lowest ever in urban warfare. Originally, about, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, they were saying it was 2.1 for every 2.1. That's the amount of civilians killed. Now it's as low as, I believe, like 1.5. Still awful. Nobody wants civilians being killed. But you watch the self-restraint of the whole army of Israel to wait, to warn populations, to move almost 2 million people out of the way before they engage. That's amazing zerizut. That's amazing enthusiasm and zeal. Okay, so let's hold that. The final thing I will say, if you're following along or you're Israeli yourself, welcome. You know that we have finally passed that all men in the state of Israel who are citizens, particularly Haredi Jewish men, but even Arab, Muslim or Arab Christian men, we'll stick with Haredim right now, are to engage and enlist and enroll in the army and serve. If you don't know about this, they had been excluded. A lot of, I would say, the narrative that for a long time has been told is that their service to God was Torah, was learning Torah, Talmud Torah during the day. Okay. They mark themselves in a way a bit like the Nazir, as a separate people, separate population, almost like the Kohanim, the priest. That was what they were going to do, and they weren't going to engage in secular culture. And what is the gadol of secular culture? The big thing is everyone goes through either service to the country. If they're not going to be training and serving in the army, they will do some type of public service. Usually that's Orthodox women, if they choose to opt that way, or people with disabilities. Everyone else has to train and serve in some area of the Israeli army. Okay. So what did Mussar come to teach and really bring to our lives as Jews? So I want to bring something that's Forno, one of our greatest commentators, brings about the Nazir, that the Nazir had to understand that he or she had to restrain him or herself from new wine and old wine, right? Any kind of wine. And Sforno really basically discusses abstaining from physical desire, right? And that it's really knowing the difference between self-discipline and self-denial. And that this desire is the desire to restrain from drinking wine, for instance, is not a basic need for one's health and well-being, and that the abstention from it will not weaken a person. Okay. And that, matter of fact, goes on to say a person should not subjugate himself to fasting, for this will have a negative effect on the health and will decrease the ability for that person to devote themselves to spiritual activity, the mitzvot, the commandments, and what to better themselves, right? The idea, Sforno goes on to say, the purpose of this abstention, right, abstention from physical pleasure, is to enable the person to devote themselves entirely to the Almighty, not only to delve in Torah study. This is where Mussar and Mussar mindfulness really strengthens the Jewish people and Judaism. Not just a Torah study, but to perfect, to work on this path of perfecting one's character so that he can walk in the ways of Hashem, being compassionate and merciful. So we have a whole population, came out of Eastern Europe mostly, not only, who really bought into and fostered and habituated this concept that the highest thing that matters is Talmud Torah, that the men are to sit and learn. Nothing's mentioned of perfecting one's traits. We have Rav Salanter who comes along, who is a huge Rav in that community, who says, wait, we have to be doing more than just Torah study. We have to be cultivating our midot and having this path and practice, right? And this is the strength, is that realizing, and then we get this from the Nazir, that we have to be disciplined enough and have the wisdom passed on to us, the practice to know the difference. And that while we should always be increasing our divikut, our closeness and our ability to draw close to God, sometimes through increasing Torah knowledge from learning, it's also from working on our soul traits, on this path of Mussar, what is often called perfecting one's character trait, one's character. I don't like using the language perfect because I don't believe in perfection for the human being. I think it's much better. I mean, today some people will use the term tikkun hamidot, like refining, repairing one's soul traits. I don't even care for that because the practice is so much more than that. The path is so much more than just one's midot. Okay, so, but what the Nazir comes to teach is that this self-discipline, right, leads to more mitzvot, leads to mitzvah, right? But self-denial weakens the person and it's forbidden. So what's happening with the Haredim before this law was passed is that they are denying whole part of observance, which is to engage in this path, and a whole part of the observance that there is more to serving God that's actually obligated of us. That even if you study and look at the Torah, our people entered the land and fought. Our people served. So to realize that part of one's service as an Israeli is to serve, is to show up and to protect our people and our land and our way of being. to deny this weakens not only that person and his soul, it weakens Am Yisrael. It weakens all of us. We are a weaker army and nation state because this quasi-fake form of Kohanim and Nazirhood was allowed all this time. And no more. We have had enough. We are finally saying and standing up to say, and God willing, there are many Haredim who have already enlisted and have already been serving. But more and more will stand up and say and realize his responsibility, which is, yes, I'm still going to continue and learn Talmud Torah, and I'll try to, bring my Torah and my Gemara with me while I'm serving. There are plenty of soldiers learning together. And I'm also to serve. I'm also to be there strengthening my Am and my country, that this is also how I am to serve God. Right? This is so important. I even push this, and we haven't faced this yet. I believe Orthodox women also should not be able to stand before a committee and say, I don't want to serve. I'm going to do Sherut Lumi. Instead, I'm going to do service. Unless she has a disability, unless she has some reason why she can't or shouldn't serve, she should be in the army, learning those skills, training, and serving on behalf of her people. That is her service to God also. I think it's very important. Might be controversial to hear this, but this is very important. We are one nation. We are one people, right? Anyone who took a Nazir oath before only did it for a short amount of time. They were never meant ever to be in a permanent state, right? The Haredim were never meant to be in a permanent state of sitting in the Beit Midrash, in the house of learning, and only doing Talmud Torah, or Orthodox women only being in a permanent state of doing service, national service. No one is allowed to separate and practice that form of self-denial from what all the rest are doing and serving. Okay, this is what we learn. This is why our ancestors and God brought the case of the Nazir to us, to make sure we really understand it's okay sometimes to dedicate oneself to God for a particular reason in a short amount of time. There's a contract. And that outside of that, that person is to be belonging to and part of the people. And that today means serving in our army, strengthening us, strengthening our land and our borders, everyone. So with that, we're going to move into our mindfulness meditation practice. I invite you to assume one of your postures. It could be seated like I am. I'm going to come to the edge of the seat so I feel that my back is really strong and upright. I want to feel dignified, right? And that should be reflected also in my posture, created in the image and likeness of the divine. You can also be walking back and forth, going nowhere in particular, or standing in a strong mountain pose, not moving, being fully embodied, trying to come into your body. Could also be lying down, keep your eyes open to remain awake and alert. If you are seated like me, either on a zafu, a meditation cushion, or here, I invite you to close your eyes. You don't need to if you don't want to, just lower your gaze to kind of cut out visual stimulation. And that we're going to begin with 3 deep cleansing breaths to really invite ourselves fully here, right? This whole coming into the body as much as you can. We do that by coming into the breath, coming into awareness of my voice, the breath and the body, inviting your head, heart, mind, spirit fully here. Inhalation and exhale. Inhalation, inviting ease, and exhale, letting out any dis-ease, which feels like disease. This final one, raising your shoulders up on the inhalation to your ears and dropping the shoulders on the exhalation. Woo. Feeling how much they lowered, how good that feels to be present and to be here. What a gift to fully arrive, coming to stillness, coming to that quiet stillness. This is a gift to yourself. No more controlling of the breath. Let it come to its own natural rhythm. So our practice of mindfulness meditation today is to really focus in on what is happening in the body when I talk through what we're going to engage in, which is I want to bring us back to the midah of zerizut, of zeal, of enthusiasm. Even saying those words, I want you to move through recognizing if there's been any reactivity or response to zeal, enthusiasm, zerizut. Do you feel anything in the body? Any sensations? Like for me, I feel a little tightness and excitement in the chest, a little bit of energy in the stomach. Almost like, whew, I'm awake to purpose, right? I better be on. I'm serving God kind of feeling. And then through that recognizing to see if you can just allow whatever arises. For some of you, it might be like fear or dread, or sloth and torpor. I want to go to sleep when she talks about zeal or enthusiasm. Whatever it might be, just notice whatever arises with curiosity, with a sense of, I want to learn from myself in this experience, with compassion, with kindness. So really just accepting whatever arises. No need to over-identify with whatever arises. No need to jump on it and be like, that's me. Just simply, it's like you're an observer, watching whatever arises, and that's it. Just witnessing. No need to change it or control it. No need to make it happen either. Nothing is arising. You don't feel anything. You're not aware of anything. That's okay. Just be present. Since we've moved through recognizing what might arise and really allowing it, bringing in a real strong sense of investigation. What has arisen? What does it feel like? What does it look like? Where is it? How am I with it? Can I be with this? That's the eye of the rain practice. And finally, we move through the N of really non-identifying with whatever arises, and also a form of nurturing ourselves, understanding that this is part of the practice, being present with whatever is here. So I want you to think in your own life that you might have had great discernment, wise, right discernment, and then you moved into acting well. You decided to move forward with what it is that you wanted to do on behalf of others or in your service to God. And then once you were in the middle of it, you started to feel and notice it was difficult. It was challenging to finish and follow through to completion. Allow one time in your life where something like that happened. Allow that to surface. Really bring it before you. Once you're bringing that memory, notice where that memory lies in your body, how it feels to have not finished that, to have walked away, didn't have enough discipline and self-restraint and strength to either seek the resources and the support you needed, or even gaining the kind of strength yourself to move forward, but you didn't follow through. Where do you feel that in the body? What does it feel like? What does it look like to you? If you had to describe it to yourself on behalf of someone else, is it a big ball in your stomach? Maybe it's actually back pain and discomforts. Maybe you feel tightness in the throat, in the tongue, and the mouth. Can your hands rest calmly as you recall this? As you are investigating this and attempting to allow whatever arises, being sure to practice self-compassion, kindness. You're not here to judge yourself in the sense of beating yourself up for not completing something. You're here to witness so that you can learn, so that you can investigate and nurture yourself by even asking, what could I have done differently? What is it that I needed? What is it that I need right now to move through this practice? Can I attempt to do what it is I think I needed next time? Can I be with it so that I can follow through my service to God, my benefiting others through completion? Really bringing a sense of great nurturing. And notice any voices that arose or maybe are arising right now that are hindrances, that are obstacles that have come to cause you to practice more self-restraint or self-denial than is needed. We don't want to be doing self-denial that is not going to bring you closer to God, is not going to bring you closer in your service towards others and God, of benefiting others, toward more mitzvot, right? That's not where we're aiming. So that's meaning we're not going to beat ourselves up. We're not going to fall asleep. We're not going to become harsh and judgmental towards ourselves. We're not going to move towards denial, which is the voice, the narrative, the movie in your head that's saying, I didn't really do that, or I couldn't have done that. What we call terutzim, right? Excuses. What is arising for you? What voice tries to get in the way of you following through, practicing that healthy self-restraint? Just notice it. Say, oh, this is my curriculum. This is unique to me. I recognize this. I've heard this voice, this movie, this narrative before. What is it for you? I actually had this even arise today. I will share in this meditation. I've had trouble with sleep from the wars, and I'm now entering my 50th decade, and God willing, hopefully someday we'll enter menopause. And with that have come changes in my sleep and my hormones and my pattern. So I'm just not sleeping as well as I used to. And so I notice this voice arise throughout the day when I go to perform a mitzvah on behalf of others that I know will bring greater good to the world, to others. I hear this voice that says, "Oh, you're so tired. You really should just go nap right now. It's okay. You deserve to care for yourself. Go to sleep. That's what you should do." And it sounds like a positive voice. It's very persuasive, trying to use the language of self care. I should get enough sleep. But I know that voice. And that voice knows me as part of my curriculum. It's part of my Yetzer Hara, what we call evil inclination, but I like to call the inclination to take you off the path, to distract you. And mine always uses the language of healthy self care for the benefit of others. Like if I go and take a nap, I'll be rested and I can serve others better. But I know the truth of that voice. There's never enough sleep. There's never enough naps. You just put one foot in front of the other, do my service, then I can take care of myself. So, what is your voice? Coming with it with what we call a beginner's mind, where you can kind of laugh and smile at it and watch it. That real witnessing. You might even feel a little bit of that emotional distance from any reactivity while witnessing. So your Yetzer Hatov, what we call the good inclination, the inclination towards keeping you on the path towards holiness. What is it saying to you? What is its narrative? How is it strengthening you? Taking refuge in God and our ancestors in this path of Mussar mindfulness and Torah, Dharma, really strengthening us, right? What is that voice? That soft, still voice within, the gift from God. Sitting with that voice, nurturing yourself, we will move into silent meditation for the next few minutes, and then I will ring the bells to bring us out. Before I ring the bells, part of this practice is known as coming close to, le'akriv, right? This drawing near to that which is uncomfortable, to that which is challenging, a being with. That is also our form of service to God. Facing that the gift and the blessing that God has sent us, our own personal curriculum to help us with our growth in this path. You had your eyes closed, please gently and slowly open them. If it's your practice, giving a great bow to Hashem, to God, to yourself for the discipline and zerizut, enthusiasm for doing this practice and showing up. To our ancestors who loved us. This is the great act of chesed, of love towards us, that they passed on this tradition to us. And to all of you, right? Engaging with our teachers, our traditions, in order to learn and strengthen each other, to be here. Thank you for today's learning and practice. Thank you for entrusting me and showing up. Please do consider becoming a member of the Institute for Holiness, definitely subscribing on our website of kehilatmussar.com so that you can receive the newsletter and announcements of what is coming, what you can participate in and join. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Really just taking this one step at a time during these very trying, difficult times, seeking refuge in God, seeking refuge in community, right? And seeking refuge in the teachings and the practices of the path of Mussar mindfulness. I'm Rabbi Chasya Steinbauer, the founder and director of the Institute for Holiness, Hamachon lekedusha, Kehilat Mussar Mindfulness. Thank you again. I look forward to meeting soon for our next parsha of Baha'alotecha, where we will engage in more learning and practice. Take care.